Hello, and thank you for attending the session on printing on fabric. My name is Rick Grijalva. We'll be going over several topics today. These are listed here. What is printing on fabric? What tools do you need? Things you can do. The kind of printing on fabric for what purpose? Warnings, steps, examples, the use of Word, Microsoft's Word, and question and answers via email. What is printing on fabric? Well, printing on cotton at home or in shop is basically the main theme of this presentation. And from a quilting point of view, quilting on cotton is it. Printing on anything else doesn't quite make it. You also have the ability to do image transfer so that you can transfer to heavy materials such as sweatshirts. This was very popular beginning in the 1990s, and you still have a lot of it going on now. You also now can do mass printing on synthetics and on cotton. Again, cotton is what's used in quilting. The tools you need are basically three groups. The first is the camera, a photo, media, and a printer. And it's very helpful if you have a camera that you have a media reader that you can transfer it over to a computer or a printer, or a connector to connect to a computer or a printer. If you have a photo, you need a scanner. And a lot of printers have scanners. And if you have the picture on a media, which can even be email, then you need a way to get it to the printer or in the printer, which usually involves a computer. The computer is usually needed because I have yet to run across a situation where we did not want to adjust or crop or do something to a photo. When you have a media reader, it's easy to transfer to the computer, or you can use a transfer cable. As I said or insinuated, customers always want adjustments. Because when you took a picture of the barn, you were taking a picture of the barn. Now, 40 years later, you're interested in Uncle Tom. You can also use programs that are available on the web to adjust your pictures. You don't necessarily have to own your own, although I use Adobe Photoshop, and there are several versions. You also need something to print upon. We use EQ printables. We found them to be very reliable, very clean, easy to use, and they don't age as well. They don't have the problems of aging that other materials seem to have. But you can get any similar cotton paper-backed printable fabric. And if you're doing t-shirts and that kind of thing, I recommend using Avery t-shirt transfers, specifically the ones for dark t-shirts, because they produce much better pictures. And when you do printing on fabric, you have to remember that you are dealing with red, green, blue, and black printing. And the only way those come out well is if you are printing on a white or near white fabric. Anything else starts adding unwanted colors to the picture or whatever it is you are copying. Things you can do with, printing on fabric. Well, there are memory quilts, all those quilts with all those pictures all over them. Memory quilts with names. I highly suggest those because we may remember who the people are, but the next generation won't. And by the time you're looking at a memory quilt, you're already facing that problem. And some of these quilts we've run into are being made for people who are entering Alzheimer's. And they want to be able to have pictures of the loved ones so they can look at them. And it'd be nice if there were names. You can also do customized labels. You can do shams for pillows. That's a big thing when I was working in England in the early 2000s, was to put wedding pictures in a pillow sham and make that a wedding present. You can design on fabric, make designs, take pictures, put them on fabric of all kinds of things. We'll have an example of that. And of course you can have customized t-shirts or anything else you want. Now, what kind of printing for what purpose? There are several kinds of ways of printing, and they're usually for different purposes. For example, if you're printing for, quilting, it needs to be cotton. Anything else tends to be too flexible. And we use EQ printables. We've used lots of other comparables, and this is we found to be the best. If you're going to print for yardage, print like, I want 10 yards of this thing, that gets to be a bit pricey when you're printing it on a small printer, plus the size is a problem. I've only been able to print up to a Super B size, which is 13 by 19. So if you want anything really big, like 45 wide or something like that, you need to go to some place like Spoonflower, because they use Kaufman Kona ready for dyeing fabric. If it's for heavy fabric, like sweatshirts, use transfers. And if it's for synthetics, use companies like FabFad, those kind of things. They produce beautiful, beautiful reproductions, but they are really stretchy and not really usable for quilting, which is my focus. There are warnings go along with this. Do-it-yourself items, such as we do, are fabric, it is fabric that has 200 count, but it's not as sturdy as, let's say, Kona cotton. Just they don't have as thick of a thread. So, but you do not need a stabilizer under it when you incorporate it into a quilt, unless you are using it for applique, such as appliquing on a label on the back. Also, most commercial printers don't produce cotton output, and that's why I particularly recommended the one company. Follow the instructions on your, do-it-yourself fabric. They differ by product. Every one are slightly different. So read the instructions before you do it. And take care in laundering your fabric. Consider putting laundering instructions on the label, because non-quilters do not understand the idea of gentle wash, low heat drying. They take it to the laundromat and scorch it to death. So those will be harder on printed fabric than they are on, digitally printed fabric, than they are on the regular commercially printed and dyed fabric. The steps to do this are kind of unusual from what you guesstimate. The first step is to design the item to the blocks and print size. So design the item. Take into account all of the pictures you're using, all of the items, so that if you want uniformity, there's uniformity. If you want really scrappy, fine, do that too. It just is a little harder design that way. Also, if you are using pictures that have been produced by others commercially, you need to get the rights, such as if you are using marketing logos and things like that, get the rights to use them. They are not yours. Just because they're on the web does not mean they're yours. You have to have a scanner if you have a camera or something else, or a picture or something else that you're using, or camera or drawing software. Once you get a master that is digitized in the computer and you're going to adjust it, copy the master and keep the original master so you can always go back to it. I always put ADJ behind the picture for when I start working on it. And then adjust, crop, etc. the copy. You can use Photoshop, online applications, or to a limited extent Word. Word allow you to change the brightness, crop it, things like that. When you're done, you need to test it. So test it on paper. Paper is really cheap compared to fabric that is glued on paper. So test it out in the size you want it, make sure it works the way you want it, and then print it on the expensive fabric. When you're done printing, remove the backing. When you've done that, rinse it in running water, not standing water, but running water so that the dyes wash away, because some dyes dry faster than others, and different printers put out different amount of ink, and the different fabric absorbs the ink differently. And then, of course, dry it. These are some examples that we'll be going through next. On costs, when we use EQ printables, an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet basically is $3.50. You have to buy them in a group, so a 6 block sheet is, or 6 sheet block is $20.99. Now you can get, unless you're printing a really big picture, you can get a lot of 4 by 6s on there. So space them accordingly. Use the software not to print it right in the middle. They all try to do that. Move it off to the side so you can get several pictures on. You can also, on our printer, you can only go as big as your printer. And we have a printer that prints up to 13 by 19. And each sheet costs $8.50. For 6 sheets, it's basically $50. Same steps when using the big or the little. Example of the labels. There are 2 labels on this slide. The first one is from the Bluffton Scrap Artist Quilt Club. It was for a 2007 quilt that was raffled off for a donation. And so it gave the reason for it, so that we had the Swiss Historical Society and who made it, and who long-armed it, Forever in Stitches. The next one shows what the same quilt club does for their soldier quilts. And they notice there are washing instructions on it, and there's information as to who provided the money for it, who it was done by. Another one on the top is one of ours. And this we put on the quilt so that it can be in trunk shows, so it can be shown at shows. And so it lists all of the pertinent information that would usually be on a label, including our logo over to the left. It gives the title of the quilt, the designer, who it was pieced by, who it was quilted by, the stitch pattern. We thought it was important to include the stitch pattern in it and the date it was created. We even had one quilt one time we made where we took a picture of the quilt and put it on the label. It was an unusual quilt, and so we made it in the shape of the state of Ohio, the label. The bottom one is a celebration. Again, it was for a quilt that was made for celebration for St. Rose Parish. And of course, there's a rose there. Got the rose off the web. It did not, this particular rose did not require copyright issues. But this was used in a quilt. This is an example of a large label or block done for Pat, who was the daughter of Shirley. There are 3 items that were basically done for this project. They were done from artwork that was done for the company Shirley's Gourmet Popcorn. And so we had to get permission in order to use the artwork. The popcorn was made from the one kernel, and we added yellow to it to give it kind of what we thought was a proper mix, and Pat approved. The other on the left is their logo in total. These were the Shirley's block was the main focus of the quilt, and the popcorn was background fabric used on the front of the quilt. Both of these were produced by Super Bee 13 by 19 inch fabric. This shows the relationship of the size of the printouts to Pat. Here's an example of a large block, another one. This one is bigger than Shirley's, and the reason is because it's on point. So it's 25 inches on point or 19 on a side. So as you can see, there is a block here, block here, block here, block here, and one in the center with 2 pictures. It's a wetting picture for the center of a quilt. And we wanted to have, we used Word to put in the date and the name, and of course here was a picture that they got that had just married in sand and footprints. This is an example of a huge label. This has composed of 9 13 by 19 inch Super Bee sheets pieced together. It's over 40 inches tall. It has 96 scripture verses. They wanted it to be visible and readable in 12-point type. So it's very large. Because we did not want to have people just turning over the quilt forever looking at the verses on the back and the references to the blocks on the front, we created a life-size poster, the same size in paper and poster board, to be displayed with the quilt. So the quilt was a donation to a church. Memory quilts also show how, you take a picture of somebody when you get together, and of course there's a window in the background, and it's the only time they ever got together, and so you have to have it photo adjusted so you can see the people. On the bottom right, left, you have just 2 kids, and on the bottom right, you have a picture of a lady who was at this time not a lady with her pet. and it gave the date. So this is an example what I was mentioning about having memory quilts with printing. This is an example of using newspaper information for several reasons. One, we used several sources for it. For example, the top left is a picture of the actual article that was written in the Bluffton News about Joel. And the right, or let's go back, at the bottom left you see some stripes. They wanted these stripes behind the article to fill up the space to make the blocks uniform. Okay, so at the right you see the blocks, you see the articles, but amazingly the pictures change colors and it's not quite the same picture. And the reason is since printing on newsprint is fine for the printing, pictures tend not to copy well. So most of the newspapers will offer their pictures for sale. In this particular case, for some reason, they gave them the pictures, and they were color pictures. So what we did is we basically put the color picture on top of the article and put the article on top of the fabric in Photoshop and printed it. He was so happy with it that he went farther, and when it was football season, he took the newspaper article on the right and made fabric out of it on the left. Now those pictures are exactly the same, except they're not the same ones. The newsprint on the right could not be copied to make a good copy, so again he went to the newspaper and got a picture, and we just put it in to make it a beautiful picture. Other kinds of memory quilts can include things like letters of achievement, notices, diplomas, that kind of thing. You can almost go endlessly the ideas for using, printed fabric, with the stuff you want printed, not with what some designer wants printed. Now here is an example of using Word. It's actually the same label that we saw before. But notice here we have Word because one of the things it does, it allows us to see, and it can be any word processor, not just Word. That's what we have. We have the rulers on the top, so we can see exactly how big this thing is going to be and where to place things. We've placed the picture, our logo, and we made it tight so that the letters would all go to the right. And you type what you want. You change things to fit the way you like. Notice we have different fonts for Forever and Stitches and the rest of it, and different color print. Fonts. Just do what you want to do, and then print it on paper and then print it on fabric. If you want large quantities of fabric printed with your design, if you want to print on cotton, go to Spoonflower, and they print on cotton. You can use your designs or choose designs that somebody else created. And if you create a design, you can even tell them that you're willing to let people use it, and you get a commission off of the fabric you buy, that people buy from you. And they print from swatches to 42-inch wide fabric. Why 42-inch wide? Because you can't use, the salvage in anything. So it's 42-inch wide. FabDab is one that prints on nylon or polyester-based fabrics. Very stretchable, usually very high quality, but they require a minimum of 5 yards. Whereas Spoonflower will print a swatch. It'll be an expensive swatch, but it will not be as expensive as 5 yards. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please email us at printing@foreverinstitches.com, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for attending, and have a blessed day.